Hi, welcome to History 102 here at Pasco Hillsborough Hernando State College. As part of your undergraduate overview of American history, they will explore a high-level overview of rural expansion in the American Southeast, from colonists to cartoon characters, through conquests and kumquats. This lecture is for the fans of James Burke's Connections series on BBC. If you haven't been exposed to it, just do a quick search. You'll love it, I promise. There's a common joke here amongst native Floridians that all of our county fairs are named after either a pirate, a fish, a critter with teeth, or a fruit. Now let's expand on that by adding choo-choo trains, rum, and a famous mouse. How are all these things connected? Let's take a look at the rural expansion of the American Southeast over the past few centuries, with brief emphasis on culture, economics, and orange juice. While the region now known as Florida was an early destination for Spanish explorers in the 1500s, we're going to focus on the English colonial period in this lesson, beginning there and moving forward. Now, the region now known as the Carolinas used to be a province of the Kingdom of England and later the Kingdom of Great Britain in the early 1700s. The North American Carolina province consisted of all or parts of present-day Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. The South American Carolina province extended further all the way through what is now known as Florida, all the way down to the Caribbean until about 1712, when the Carolinas were officially partitioned into North and South colonies, North and South Carolina colonies. The earliest European settlers to the region didn't want formal towns, preferring a free claim to their prospective farmlands. However, after numerous skirmishes with the local Native American tribes, a new plan was drafted and presented to the governor of South Carolina, Sir Francis Nicholson. This plan was to purposely establish towns well into the interior of South Carolina and populate these towns with hardy fighting men to serve as a deterrent against any future Native American hostilities. The governor, however, did nothing, effectively leaving the colonial governors and the township leaders to fend for themselves as they expanded into Native American territories. Now, after the French and Indian War ended in 1763, Florida was then split into West and East Florida, both territories of Britain. Up until this time, the most famous or infamous tourists of the time were pirates who used the Gulf and Atlantic coastlines to make their fortunes. The ports of Pensacola, Mobile, Tampa continued to honor the memories of these buccaneers through festivals and, of course, sports teams. The names Billy Bowlegs and Jose Gaspar used to inspire awe and fear. Now they inspire parades, beads, parties, and boat crews funded by the wealthiest of local citizens. Now, we're all aware of the African slave trade that flourished in the colonies during this time, up until when England abolished it. However, not many are aware of the other slave trade, that of white European indentured servants. Now, in full disclosure, I bring this up here in our narrative because my ancestors were among this group. And I'll save you the story of those two Welsh fishermen who were rescued by an immigrant ship heading here to the colonies. I'll save that for another lecture. But immigrant Europeans at this time working under indenture could be found in all regions of mainland America, the colonies at the time, during the 17th and 18th centuries, and even well into the 19th century. During the 18th century, this practice developed into an increasingly important labor market in which the migrant did not necessarily commit to future service contract prior to leaving Europe, but instead boarded the boat and negotiated their passage with the shipping company to pay for their transportation and lodging while they crossed the Atlantic. Now, once they arrived here in the colonies, hopefully they had friends or family or a business partner that could settle their travel debt. If they didn't, then they were sold into servitude. They were bonded servants. Now let's move forward until just after the end of the Civil War and tell a tale of two Henrys, two kings of industry, that is, who played a huge part in the rural expansion of Florida. Henry Flagler and Henry Plant. Now, Flagler was focused on the east coast of Florida, while Plant was focused on the west coast. Together, they used railway ties to stitch the state together, financially, geographically, and most importantly, in terms of urbanization of the wildlands of the United States tropics. Henry Bradley Plant, the one on the West Coast, he was Flagler's counterpart on the East Coast. But on the West Coast, he was a Connecticut native who had come south during the just leading up to and during the Civil War and consolidated some rail companies. Ultimately, Plant had a network of rail hubs in Montgomery, Charleston, all the way down to Tampa. And to connect trade to the Caribbean, Plant created a steamship line out of those some of those ports, all the way down to the islands. Now, in addition to his transportation ventures, Plant, like Flagler on the other coast, lured Northerners to visit Florida, most notably with his magnificent Tampa Bay Hotel. This hotel, the biggest and most luxurious of its time, is still open to the public as a museum on the site of the University of Tampa. Now, the other King Henry, Henry Flagler, received generous land grants from wealthy landowners along the Atlantic coast and opened the peninsula to extensive winter tourism. In 1988, New Englander George Canning Hill proclaimed that the rest of the country had found its Persian gardens in Florida's new resorts that were being built down a peninsula that projected into the neighborhood of the tropics. Those are actually quotes that you would find on flyers and handouts. While tourism was a very popular and large part of Florida's economy, the natural resources of the state were also being explored, exported, exploited, and enjoyed by millions of consumers in the northeastern United States. Now, the railroads facilitated the interstate trade of cotton, lumber, fruit, cattle, seafood, and even exotic pets. Contrary to popular belief, though, Florida didn't become known as the Sunshine State until 1970. However, tourists were already flocking to the state for the natural citrus, melons, tomatoes, strawberries, and other foods that flourished in the climate, all of which, by the way, now have festivals named after them. Additionally, the state has also attracted famous celebrities such as Alexander Graham Bell, Ernest Hemingway, Truman Capote, and Jimmy Buffett. Speaking of Margaritaville, during Prohibition, the United States abolished the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol, and this was during the Roaring Twenties. To get around this, enterprising businessmen would arrange for spirits to be warehoused in the Bahamas, which at the time were under British rule and not impacted by the 18th Amendment, the one that put prohibition into law. Now, the southern coastlines of Florida and the railways that crisscross the state provided grounds for the illicit circumvention of this law. The New York Times reported in 1925 that administrators of 24 new federal enforcement districts were installed as part of the Treasury Department's reorganized prohibition unit. So think back of all your movies that you've seen about the FBI coming in and whacking barrels and spilling beer and spirits all over the place. That's what was going on here. Now, they were given their marching orders and an outline projected to dry up the nation, and allotted them a whopping 10 days to put their staffs in place and enact these prohibition era actions against the local bars and everything. The huge success of Florida's rum running business, however, helped to ignite the flames of the state's rapid growth in and after the 20s. Now, keep in mind the Florida land boom was well underway since Henry Plant and Henry Flagler opened the state to rural expansion and commercialization only 2 decades prior. So, within 20 years after establishing these railways, they were now being used to go against prohibition. As popularized by Hollywood on TV and the big screen, Florida's reputation as a safe haven for notorious criminals such as Al Capone gave the state a bit of that edge that many Americans found enticing during the Roaring Twenties. Now let's skip over a couple world wars and let's look at one of the biggest impacts on Florida's economy and ruralization, and that was the relocation of a mouse. In 1965, the Disney brothers, Walt and Roy, announced the destination of their East Coast Disney recreation project would be in the middle of a swamp near Orlando. They bought and expanded the land for rock bottom prices and quickly held influence over local and state politicians due to the promise of tax revenues. Now, the existing railway and interstate systems were expanded to allow for the growth of these projects and the surrounding suburban areas. Now, those of us Floridians of a certain age that have lived through the growth and financial impact of this adventure, we hold different views. Some of us are positive and negative, and I guess it just depends on which side of the mouse you found yourself. You're either the beneficiary of the economic boom or the victim of ruthless land grabs and almost mob boss like tax rules. So this sums up our trip to Florida through the ages. I hope you've enjoyed it and possibly even learned something. All the sources for this lecture that I've cited will be provided in the course outline. Please let me know if you have any questions at all. God bless and have a great day.